Chapter 10 of Zastrozzi, a Romance. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Zastrozzi, a Romance, by Percy Bysshe Shelley. Chapter 10. Persevering in the prosecution of her design, the time passed away slowly to Matilda, for Verezzi's frame, becoming every day more emaciated, threatened to her alarmed imagination approaching dissolution. Slowly to Verezzi, for he waited with impatience for the arrival of death, since nothing but misery was his in this world. Useless would it be to enumerate the conflicts in Matilda's soul. Suffice it to say that they were many, and that their violence progressively increased. Verezzi's illness at last assumed so dangerous an appearance that Matilda, alarmed, sent for a physician. The humane man who had attended Verezzi before was from home, but one skilful in his profession arrived, who declared that a warmer climate could alone restore Verezzi's health. Matilda proposed to him to remove to a retired and picturesque spot which she possessed in the Venetian territory. Verezzi, expecting speedy dissolution, and conceiving it to be immaterial where he died, consented; and indeed he was unwilling to pain one so kind as Matilda by a refusal. The following morning was fixed for the journey. The morning arrived, and Verezzi was lifted into the chariot, being yet extremely weak and emaciated. Matilda, during the journey, by every care, every kind and sympathizing attention, tried to drive away Verezzi's melancholy, sensible that, could the weight which pressed upon his spirits be removed, he would speedily regain health. But no, it was impossible. Though he was grateful for Matilda's attention, a still deeper shade of melancholy overspread his features. A more heartfelt inanity and languor sapped his life. He was sensible of a total distaste of former objects, objects which perhaps had formerly forcibly interested him. The terrific grandeur of the Alps, the dashing cataract as it foamed beneath their feet, ceased to excite those feelings of awe which formerly they were wont to inspire. The lofty pine groves inspired no additional melancholy, nor did the blooming valleys of Piedmont or the odoriferous orangeries which scented the air gladden his deadened soul. They travelled on. They soon entered the Venetian territory, where, in a gloomy and remote spot, stood the Castella di Laurentini. It was situated in a dark forest. Lofty mountains around lifted their aspiring and craggy summits to the skies. The mountains were clothed half up by ancient pines and plane trees, whose immense branches stretched far, and above, bare granite rocks, on which might be seen occasionally a scathed larch, lifted their gigantic and misshapen forms. In the centre of an amphitheatre formed by these mountains, surrounded by woods, stood the Castella di Laurentini, whose grey turrets and time-worn battlements overtopped the giants of the forest. Into this gloomy mansion was Verezzi conducted by Matilda. The only sentiment he felt was surprise at the prolongation of his existence. As he advanced, supported by Matilda and a domestic, into the castella, Matilda's soul, engrossed by one idea, confused by its own unquenchable passions, felt not that ecstatic, that calm and serene delight only experienced by the innocent, and which is excited by a return to the place where we have spent our days of infancy. No, she felt not this. The only pleasurable emotion which her return to this remote castella afforded was the hope that, disengaged from the tumult of and proximity to the world, she might be the less interrupted in the prosecution of her madly planned schemes. Though Verezzi's melancholy seemed rather increased than diminished by the journey, yet his health was visibly improved by the progressive change of air and variation of scenery, which must at times momentarily alleviate the most deep-rooted grief. Yet, again in a fixed spot, again left to solitude and his own torturing reflections, Verezzi's mind returned to his lost, his still adored Julia. He thought of her ever, unconsciously he spoke of her, and by his rapturous exclamations sometimes almost drove Matilda to desperation. Several days thus passed away. Matilda's passion, which, mellowed by time and diverted by the variety of objects and the hurry of the journey, had relaxed its violence, now, like a stream pent up, burst all bounds. But one evening, maddened by the tender protestations of eternal fidelity to Julia's memory which Verezzi uttered, her brain was almost turned. Her tumultuous soul, agitated by contending emotions, flashed from her eyes. Unable to disguise the extreme violence of her sensations, in an ecstasy of despairing love, she rushed from the apartment where she had left Verezzi, and unaccompanied wandered into the forest to calm her emotions and concert some better plans of revenge. For in Verezzi's presence she scarcely dared to think. Her infuriated soul burned with fiercest revenge. She wandered into the trackless forest, and, conscious that she was unobserved, gave vent to her feelings in wild exclamations. "Oh, Julia, hated Julia! Words are not able to express my detestation of thee. Thou hast destroyed Verezzi. Thy cursed image, revelling in his heart, has blasted my happiness for ever. But ere I die, I will taste revenge. Oh, exquisite revenge!" She paused. She thought of the passion which consumed her. "Perhaps one no less violent has induced Julia to rival me," said she. Again the idea of Verezzi's illness, perhaps his death, infuriated her soul. Pity, chased away by vengeance and disappointed passion, fled. Did I say I pitied thee? Detested Julia? Much did my words belie the feelings of my soul. No, no, thou shalt not escape me. Pity thee! Again immersed in corroding thought, she heeded not the hour, till, looking up, she saw the shades of night were gaining fast upon the earth. The evening was calm and serene. Gently agitated by the evening zephyr, the lofty pines sighed mournfully. Far to the west appeared the evening star, which faintly glittered in the twilight. The scene was solemnly calm, but not in unison with Matilda's soul. Softest, most melancholy music seemed to float upon the southern gale. Matilda listened. It was the nuns at a convent, chanting the requiem for the soul of a departed sister. "Perhaps gone to heaven," exclaimed Matilda, as, affected by the contrast, her guilty soul trembled. A chain of horrible, racking thoughts pressed upon her soul, and, unable to bear the acuteness of her sensations, she hastily returned to the castella. Thus, marked only by the varying paroxysms of the passions which consumed her, Matilda passed the time. Her brain was confused, her mind agitated by the ill success of her schemes, and her spirits, once so light and buoyant, were now depressed by disappointed hope. "What shall I next concert?" was the mental inquiry of Matilda. "Ah, I know not." She suddenly started. She thought of Zastrozzi. "Oh, that I should have till now forgotten!" exclaimed Matilda, as a new ray of hope darted through her soul. "But he is now at Naples, and some time must necessarily elapse before I can see him. Oh, Zastrozzi, Zastrozzi, would that you were here!" No sooner had she well arranged her resolutions, which before had been confused by eagerness, than she summoned Ferdinand, on whose fidelity she dared to depend, and bid him speed to Naples and bear a letter with which he was entrusted to Zastrozzi. Meanwhile, Verezzi's health, as the physician had predicted, was so much improved by the warm climate and pure air of the Castella di Laurentini, that, though yet extremely weak and emaciated, he was able, as the weather was fine, and the summer evenings tranquil, to wander accompanied by Matilda through the surrounding scenery. In this gloomy solitude, where, except the occasional and infrequent visits of a father confessor, nothing occurred to disturb the uniform tenor of their life, Verezzi was everything to Matilda. She thought of him ever. At night, in dreams, his image was present to her enraptured imagination. She was uneasy except in his presence, and her soul, shook by contending paroxysms of the passion which consumed her, was transported by unutterable ecstasies of delirious and maddening love. Her taste for music was exquisite, her voice of celestial sweetness, and her skill, as she drew sounds of soul-touching melody from the harp, enraptured the mind to melancholy pleasure. The affecting expression of her voice, mellowed as it was by the tenderness which at times stole over her soul, softened Verezzi's listening ear to ecstasy. Yet, again recovering from the temporary delight which her seductive blandishments had excited, he thought of Julia. as he remembered her ethereal form, her retiring modesty and unaffected sweetness, a more violent, a deeper pang of regret and sorrow assailed his bosom for having suffered himself to be even momentarily interested by Matilda. Hours, days passed lingering away. They walked in the evenings around the environs of the castella. Woods, dark and gloomy, stretched far. Cloud-capped mountains reared their gigantic summits high, and dashing amidst the jutting rocks, foaming cataracts, with sudden and impetuous course, sought the valley below. Amid this scenery the wily Matilda usually led her victim. One evening, when the moon, rising over the gigantic outline of the mountain, silvered the far-seen cataract, Matilda and Verezzi sought the forest. For a time neither spoke. The silence was uninterrupted save by Matilda's sighs, which declared that violent and repressed emotions tortured the bosom within. They silently advanced into the forest. The azure sky was spangled with stars. Not a wind agitated the unruffled air. Not a cloud obscured the brilliant concavity of heaven. They ascended an eminence clothed with towering wood. The trees around formed an amphitheatre. Beneath, by a gentle ascent, an opening showed an immense extent of forest, dimly seen by the moon, which overhung the opposite mountain. The craggy heights beyond might distinctly be seen, edged by the beams of the silver moon. Verezzi threw himself on the turf. "What a beautiful scene, Matilda!" he exclaimed. "Beautiful indeed," returned Matilda. "I have admired it ever, and brought you here this evening on purpose to discover whether you thought of the works of nature as I do." "Oh, fervently do I admire this!" exclaimed Verezzi, as, engrossed by the scene before him, he gazed enraptured. "Suffer me to retire for a few minutes," said Matilda. Without waiting for Verezzi's answer, she hastily entered a small tuft of trees. Verezzi gazed surprised, and soon sounds of such ravishing melody stole upon the evening breeze that Verezzi thought some spirit of the solitude had made audible to mortal ears ethereal music. He still listened. It seemed to die away, and again a louder, a more rapturous swell succeeded. The music was in unison with the scene. It was in unison with Verezzi's soul, and the success of Matilda's artifice in this respect exceeded her most sanguine expectation. He still listened. The music ceased, and Matilda's symmetrical form emerging from the wood roused Verezzi from his vision. He gazed on her. Her loveliness and grace struck forcibly upon his senses. Her sensibility, her admiration of objects which enchanted him, flattered him, and her judicious arrangement of the music left no doubt in his mind but that, experiencing the same sensations herself, the feelings of his soul were not unknown to her. Thus far, everything went on as Matilda desired. To touch his feeling had been her constant aim. Could she find anything which interested him, anything to divert his melancholy? Or could she succeed in effacing another from his mind, she had no doubt but that he would quickly and voluntarily clasp her to his bosom. By affecting to coincide with him in everything, by feigning to possess that congeniality of sentiment and union of idea which he thought so necessary to the existence of love, she doubted not soon to accomplish her purpose. But sympathy and congeniality of sentiment, however necessary to that love which calms every fierce emotion, fills the soul with a melting tenderness, and without disturbing it, continually possesses the soul, was by no means consonant to the ferocious emotions, the unconquerable and ardent passion which revelled through Matilda's every vein. When enjoying the society of him she loved, calm delight, unruffled serenity, possessed not her soul. No, but inattentive to every object but him, even her proximity to him agitated her with almost uncontrollable emotion. Whilst watching his look, her pulse beat with unwonted violence, her breast palpitated, and, unconscious of it herself, an ardent and voluptuous fire darted from her eyes. Her passion, too, controlled as it was in the presence of Verezzi, agitated her soul with progressively increasing fervour. Nursed by solitude, and wound up perhaps beyond any pitch which another's soul might be capable of, it sometimes almost maddened her. Still surprised at her own forbearance, yet strongly perceiving the necessity of it, she spoke not again of her passion to Verezzi. End of chapter 10. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.